Well, hi there! For the past 4 years, every October, we have been reacting to the often horrible Halloween decorations that you see for sale this time of year. Pointing out not minor inaccuracies, but grievous and seemingly easily avoidable errors that wouldn't be made by someone who did even a little bit of research into the anatomy of these animals. As well as pointing out the things that they got impressively right. And hopefully learning a little something along the way. Each year I have wondered if, well, that would be the last year. And also if they will at some point, possibly as a result of our feedback, get better. And I can say that this year's crop of horrible decorations is probably our largest ever. And while I found some delightful improvements, in some ways, they might be getting worse. So let's dig in. Frankly, we have so many that I'm going to cover them in groups this year. I'm going to start with the Squamate reptiles. This is Clint's Reptiles after all. Then I think we'll talk about mammals, since we'll be releasing the most complete guide to mammals ever released on YouTube next month. A project we've been working on for more than 3 years now. And a great sequel to our video of the same magnitude that we released on the Squamate reptiles last year. So Squamates first, and then mammals. And we have a new cat, which I think we'll need to compare to our other cat, which I haven't seen in almost 2 years. But if you've seen these videos before, you probably know my cat. Could this one be worse? Surely not. Then I think we'll take a look at this ray-finned fish, which has some serious problems. And then we'll end with the birds and the spiders. I haven't decided on which order yet because one of them gives me reason to celebrate and the other, well, it's the worst of its kind that I have ever seen. Okay, so these are the Squamate reptiles for the year. And I think I'll start with the two chameleons. You know, since our logo is a chameleon. Other than the colors, these are the same. And other than the colors, these are the best chameleon skeletons that I've seen. Somebody looked at an actual chameleon skeleton. This skull is honestly basically perfect. It looks to be a panther chameleon skeleton, which, you know, it has this same crest on a panther chameleon skeleton. It has these same kind of little bumps on the skull. These teeth very much look like the teeth of a chameleon, which are kind of like little saw blades, very similar to what you'd see on like a bearded dragon or other agamid lizards. Chameleons are very closely related to the agamids after all. It even has, I think, a fairly convincing open lower temporal fenestra. It doesn't have the temporal bar, as you never see on squamates, and it's sort of open, and it really is very similar to this shape. It even has this little bone right here coming down from the lower jaw, which is the quadrate bone, and it is movable in lizards, and it really looks a lot like this in a chameleon. This skull is basically perfect. The ribs and the tail they're good enough. I mean, they're not perfect, but they're a very reasonable facsimile of what you find in a chameleon. The tail isn't bent upwards. A lot of times you'll see chameleon tails that they're prehensile, but they curl up, and real chameleon tails bend down, or they curl down, though they can extend straight like this. I did find that this end of the tail, which is probably the most important part to have be prehensile, doesn't have the little wire in it that the rest does, and so you can't actually get it to spiral up very nicely. That end is still going to stay straight. Just, you know, something that keeps you from posing it perfectly, but nothing anatomically incorrect about a chameleon looking like this either. These pectoral and pelvic girdles, you know, so mostly like the pelvis and the shoulder girdle up here, they're basically perfect. Basically perfect. And that goes all the way down into the structure of the legs. You've got a femur and a humerus, radius and ulna and tibia and fibula. And I think for the first time ever, you've got bundles of toes. Proper little chameleon feet. Almost. I mean, you got the wrong number. Chameleons, real chameleons, have 5 toes. This only has 4 on each foot. and it's pretty cool. In the front feet on chameleons, they've got 3 toes on the inside and 2 on the outside. And in the back, it's the opposite of that. So they got 3 on the outside and 2 on the inside. The bigger problem is these toes look pretty much the way that I do it when I try to simulate chameleon hands and feet. That is not actually how they're structured, though. They've got what are called zygodactyl feet, which is always the way that I see them portrayed, though usually zygodactyl is referring to the arrangement of 4 toes, having essentially 2 going out the front, 2 going out the back. In the case of chameleons, though, 2 of the toes kind of go out to the left and 2 to the right. And so it's more like this in structure, but just in bundles. And these are all going forward. So that's inaccurate. This doesn't have a proper zygodactyl toe arrangement, and it also doesn't have the right number of toes. But this is really not a very bad start. I'm pretty happy with this. This is certainly much better than our previous chameleons. So now let's get to the snakes. This video is sponsored by Cove Pure. Clean water is crucial to our health, as well as the health of our animals. And yet sink water can contain harmful contaminants like PFAs, heavy metals, and even microplastics. All things you don't want in your water or your body. That's why I'm so excited about Cove Pure. It's a plug-and-play countertop purifier that uses a powerful 4-stage filtration system, removing up to 99.9% of harmful contaminants, including PFAs, lead, arsenic, and even pharmaceutical residues. Unlike pitcher filters, Cove Pure doesn't just make your water taste better, it actually makes it safer. And it's designed for convenience, a 5-liter tank, a removable pitcher, and instant hot or cold water at the touch of a button. No plumbers, no drilling, just cleaner water right away. I actually have been spending a lot of money buying purified water for a long time, and I wanted to put in an RO system, but they're huge and they're ugly and there are all kinds of problems with them. This thing is the opposite of all of that. And so not only does it give great water for the humans here at the Reptile Room, but it's great for our misting systems. It's great for water bowls. It's great for saltwater fish and freshwater fish. And it is just an amazing asset to have. Plus, it's just really cool. If you're ready to clean up your drinking water, Cove Pure is giving our community right now $200 off. Just go to covepure.com/Clint or click the link in the description to get our discount. That's covepure.com/Clint. Your family, including your reptile family, deserves water that's not just clear, but truly clean. With Cove Pure, every sip can be safer, healthier, and a whole lot easier. Now back to the video. I've got this year 4 different snakes, and only one of them is a skeleton. And I will mention that I got one of these snakes from the guy who told me, well, actually Leisha, with me listening in, that snakes do not have bones. And this is why he doesn't carry snake skeletons. And I was just there today, and I didn't see any snake skeletons. This Technicolor Dream Snake might not be the most accurate skeleton of all time, but clearly it could be worse. To my knowledge, despite Leisha bursting into immediate laughter at my reaction in reality, but for all he could tell right in his face, he still thinks that snakes don't have skeletons. I should probably get an articulated snake skeleton and gift it to him one of these years. He's also the source of my kitty and my new cat, and one of the worst skeletons I have ever seen that I'll get to later. And this snake. So I owe him a lot. But let's start with the snake that I got from him. It's really pretty great. It claims right here to be a python, a scaly python to be specific, but it looks to me, if anything, more like a rainbow boa. Either way, it probably shouldn't have these fangs. Black tongues, like this one has, are not uncommon in snakes, so there's no problem there. Even the way that it's black at the tip and a little bit pink towards the back, you see that rather often. Black tongues are probably there to prevent them from getting sunburned, and as you get deeper into the tongue, it becomes less essential to have that pigment. The only problem I really have with this tongue is you shouldn't be able to see the whole thing going back, like all the way to the back of the mouth, because the tongue actually comes out of a little sheath right about here, and everything back here should actually be the glottis, which is the windpipe that snakes have that they can kind of extend forward, or when their mouth is closed, plug into their nostrils up above. So there should be a tube here with just the tongue sticking out from underneath that. It also should have a lot more teeth than this, but they should be considerably smaller than this. These would be like the biggest, thickest teeth of any snake this size on the planet, though it's totally understandable why it would be that way given the material it's made out of. It's really not bad. The scales on its back are not overlapping. They're kind of more like crocodilian scales in the way that they're structured, but I really don't think that they're a bad representation of snake scales, and these would be way easier to sculpt than a whole bunch of individual snake scales, though we will say here in a minute that that is possible. What I'm more excited about, though, is actually the belly on this snake, because if you get a good look at it, they don't have the same sort of scalation on the belly that they have on the top. These are proper scutes, which is actually an attribute unique to snakes, something that you can use to identify them and distinguish them from other legless lizards. It doesn't seem to have any sort of hind legs, which any python or at least male boa, though most boas have them, there are a few females that don't. So that is a bit of an oversight. If this is actually supposed to be a python, it should have some tiny legs. It doesn't. It does, however, arguably have a short tail. I don't think this is necessarily meant to be the vent. I think this is just one of many points where they had to attach individual tubes in order to make it. But this tail section is relatively short, and if you view that as the whole tail, that's actually pretty accurate. Snakes, surprisingly to most people, have not only skeletons, but tiny, short little tails. They've got very, very long bodies, very short tails. A lot of people think they're basically tail from the head back. They're actually barely tail at all. And that's another thing you can use to distinguish snakes from most other legless lizards. This one, I see no signs of labial pits, which are the infrared detecting heat pits that pythons have embedded in the scales on their lips. This guy doesn't have them. It could be part of the genus Aspidites, but these would be your womas and your blackhead pythons. But this patterning looks nothing like a woma or a blackhead python. So I don't know of any other pythons that don't have these pits. I also know of literally 0 pythons that have round pupils. All pythons, to my knowledge, have slit pupils, and also rainbow boas have slit pupils. So this is, if this is actually supposed to be a scaly python, that's definitely an inaccuracy. That said, there are a lot of snakes that do have round pupils, and a lot of people mistakenly associate slit pupils with all venomous snakes and round pupils with all non-venomous snakes. The thing is that the pupil shape has nothing to do with whether or not the snake is venomous. It has much, much more to do with whether or not the snake is nocturnal. I can think of 0 animals that have slit pupils that are diurnal. A slit pupil like you see on a cat, at least house cats, allows the eye to dilate, the pupil to dilate much wider than does a circular pupil. And so they're very, very good for animals that are frequently found in low light. And even when they're in low light, the pupil becomes almost circular because it's so wide open. And so it probably functions basically like a giant circle pupil, but it's never going to constrict down to a little pinpoint like this one. That's something that you see on all diurnal animals and some nocturnal animals. It may be the case that having an elliptical pupil would always be better for nocturnal animals, but the reality is that, well, evolution only acts on what is available. And so if a mutation never occurs for an elliptical pupil, well, they're still going to make do with circle pupils. So you'll see nocturnal animals like owls that still have circle pupils, but all elliptical pupils, to my knowledge, are found on nocturnal animals, and all diurnal animals have circle pupils. Unless you're talking about other pupil shapes, like what you'd see on a mountain goat or a squid or something like that. That said, some non-venomous snakes, like we already mentioned, some boas and pythons, a lot of other nocturnal snakes have elliptical pupils. Also, most, if not all vipers to my knowledge, have that. However, most elapid snakes, I'm not positive about death adders, but all of the elapid snakes I can think of, with the possible exception of death adders, have circular pupils. This includes mambas and coral snakes and cobras. Okay, these are very, very venomous snakes that have circle pupils. This snake does not really look like any snake in particular. It's definitely not a known python, also not a known boa, but it is not bad as just a generic snake. And Jason just pointed out to me that this is indeed a scary python, in addition to being obviously a scaly one and not a python. But what you gonna do? And here is another snake with round pupils that doesn't have round pupils. This is clearly a rattlesnake. You can tell that because of the rattle. But other than the circle pupils, which rattlesnakes do not have, it's pretty spectacular. Though most rattlesnakes, if not all of them, do have black tongues. And this pattern's a little bit weird. But, okay, so the paint job is wonky, but the model is great. I mean, one of the first things I noticed that was shocking to me, it even has loreal pits. So we talked a little bit earlier about labial pits that you'll find on boas and pythons. On boas, they're located between the scales. You can see them really clearly on an emerald tree boa. On pythons, they're embedded in the scales. So that's one way, like if you're looking at a green tree python or an emerald tree boa and you're trying to tell them apart, look at where the pits are located relative to the scales. Well, pit vipers, like rattlesnakes, have pits as well. They also detect infrared light, which is emitted by basically everything warm. So they also function basically like heat detecting pits. The difference is, instead of being on the labial scales on the lips, they're located a little bit higher on the face on the loreal scales, and there's only 2 of them. The head scales on this snake are really not too far off. I mean, a lot of rattlesnakes have a lot of smaller scales, but some of them do have large head scales like this, so these are pretty great. And on the body, they have sculpted individual, fairly accurately shaped, overlapping, proper squamate, proper rattlesnake scales that are even individually keeled. Meaning that each one has a ridge down the center of it, just like rattlesnakes and many other, especially desert-dwelling snakes, have. Individually sculpted keeled scales. That is some next level attention to detail. And they didn't stop on the belly. These belly scoots are even better than the belly scoots that we saw in the last snake. Excellent. This has a proper overall build and basic posture into the way that it's moving. You know, it's not in some overly defensive position or anything like that. The only thing I would probably change, this being a rattlesnake, is rattlesnakes tend to move with the rattle lifted off the ground, mostly to prevent it from becoming damaged while they move around. And so the tail should be up even in a non-threat posture to some degree, but I'm really not sweating that. They did a heck of a job on this thing. The head shape is also very accurate, kind of triangular in shape, very typical of vipers and death adders. And, you know, a lot of the reason for that head shape is they've got large venom glands that sit back here. And anyway, they have just basically nailed it with this thing. It's so good. Makes me happy. Unlike this monstrosity, which was just pointed out to me, very reasonably could come to us from the same creator as my kitty. When you see Kitty, you'll understand why. I think these are like maybe exactly the same teeth and these eyes and the inside of this mouth, and just wouldn't blow my mind if Kitty's creator has moved on to new things. This looks to me like it's supposed to be a cobra. I mean, I would accept other answers because it's not a very good cobra, but you know, they've got kind of that hood and that posture, though this being a flexible snake. No, the top isn't. No, this is supposed to be a cobra. The problem with this hood is it is simultaneously wide and thick. And cobra hoods are not this way. If you ever see a cobra or even a false water cobra, when it isn't flaring out the hood, its neck looks basically just like the neck of any other snake. And what happens with the hood, like all snakes, cobras have a lot of ribs going down their long bodies, right, all the way until their short tails. That's where the ribs stop. And no sternum. If they had a sternum, they wouldn't be able to swallow large things. Their body couldn't expand. And so the ribs are all floating ribs, essentially. And basically, if a snake constricts all the muscles in its back, it can pull the ribs apart and spread them very wide, which from the front will make you look much bigger and more intimidating than you are. And a cobra, despite being one of the more dangerous snakes on the planet, generally speaking, does not want to engage in a fight with something like a human or other animals our size. We're far too big to eat, and so we only can mean death for them. That's all that we can mean. And even though they could bite you and you could die 45 minutes to a few hours later, that doesn't make them feel any better about getting stomped to death right now. And so their best chance of survival is to make themselves look as big and intimidating as they can. And so they stand upright and they pull open those ribs in order to make themselves wide. And so that makes them wider. But if you saw them from the side, they would be wider and narrower when that hood is flared out, because they are actually the same size as any other snake, and they're not inflating themselves, they're pulling those ribs open. Interestingly enough, I've seen my false water cobra do that with the full length of its body when it's very intimidated. That was intimidating right back. That was real scary to see. Also, flying snakes will do this, and then they will use those flared ribs all the length of their body to glide. So it's not something totally unique to cobras, true cobras, or even cobras and king cobras. I think that's what they're trying to do here, but that's not how it works. Another grievous thing is the belly scoots, which they seem to know about because they start them. They end basically right after the end of the hood, and then we run into no more belly scoots for the rest of the belly. These fangs are also more accurate as cobra fangs than they are as... Actually, no. Now that I think about it, my kitty has rodent teeth. So these would actually be much better as the canine teeth of a cat than what that cat has. Anyway, you're in for a treat here in a little bit. But these fangs are much too long for a cobra. Cobras are elapid snakes, and other than, again, death adders, elapid snakes have fixed fangs. Man, we are talking about death adders so much for a video with no death adders in it. But the fixed fangs of a cobra wouldn't allow it to close its mouth with these. They'd either have to stick out on the side like saber teeth, or they would poke right through the bottom jaw of this snake when it closed its mouth. They don't fold back like the fangs of vipers or death adders. Its tongue also comes from way too far back, just like before. And, again, so we've had two snakes that have elliptical pupils that have been given circle pupils. This is our first snake that should have circle pupils, but it's been given elliptical pupils. They're just like, how many ways can we mess this up? And they've found them all. So let's take a look at this year's snake skeleton. Because yeah, snakes do have skeletons made of bone. And other than the color, they look pretty much like this. Well, other than the skull, which is horrible, and the tail, which I'll get to in a second. The body, though, is pretty great. I mean, it's mostly just a whole bunch of vertebrae going all the way to the end of the tail, and then ribs all the way until the tail. So until this point, this is looking good. As I mentioned before, They have no sternum, so they can swallow large things. Those can spread apart. I really have no complaints about this snake from here to here. Fantastic. And again, at least it has a skeleton. But as I mentioned, the tail has no ribs, and what it definitely doesn't have is a big ring of ribs. I don't know if anything has this. It's like a whole bunch of wishbones going to, I don't know what's going on here. Circle ribs. There should be no ribs. It should be just basically the vertebrae with tiny little spines coming off the side, and that's it. And I wish that was the worst thing, but the reality is that this skull is an abomination. Just for starters, starting in no particular place. I mean, it attaches to the vertebrae at the bottom. This means that it's got a foramen magnum, which is the hole at the bottom of the skull where your spinal cord enters in and connects with your brain. That's on the bottom, the ventral side of the skull, which is something you would see for animals with an extremely upright posture like a human. But snakes, despite the fact that a few can stand up like this, their posture is the opposite of upright. They are totally flat on their bellies with their head pointing straight out ahead. That foramen magnum should be at the very back of the skull. The skull is also just burly as heck, and it seems to be made of just two bones that are fused all the way down the length of it, making it one of the strongest skull, maybe the strongest skull of any vertebrate animal ever. Meanwhile, snakes' actual skulls, are like the most flexible and not burly skulls of any vertebrate. They're the opposite of this. This snake also has an extraordinarily fused lower jaw. With what appears to be a really thick simian shelf, which is this fusion, kind of additional support back behind the connection, or actually in front. It's just, this is so thick. Meanwhile, actual snakes have completely unfused lower jaws, which is what allows them to spread wide open like this so they can swallow large things. They've got a lot of flexibility everywhere in the skull, but that lower jaw is what just opens up like this. This is the most fused lower jaw I've ever seen on anything. They have completely and totally unfused lower jaws. It also lacks the quadrate bone that was so cool to see on the chameleons this year. This looks, if like anything, and it doesn't look like anything, but it looks much more like a dog skull. It's got a pretty nice zygomatic arch here, but with, again, a human foramen magnum. When it comes to teeth, 2 fangs that seem to be fixed in place. So this would appear to be an elapid snake, despite having a head shape nothing like an elapid snake. And then no other teeth. So this is like an elapid egg-eating snake. I don't know what's going on here. It's just horrible. The body is not bad, and I'm glad it has bones. But the skull is just about the worst animal skull I've ever seen. All right, let's move on to the mammals. Okay, that gets us to the mammals. And we have some real dandies today. I'll start with this dog, because at least of the skeletons, it's probably the least worst. It does have bone ears and one of the first bone noses that I've seen, which is definitely disappointing. It has very few lumbar vertebrae and like a million thoracic vertebrae. It has no canine teeth. Kind of almost got homodont dentition, to be perfectly honest, like a crocodile. But at least the skull has a posterior foramen magnum. The pelvic girdle especially, but also the pectoral girdle, these definitely lack a lot of detail. A lot of the bones just kind of fuse together into one big piece of plastic that has no real form. And it stands with its feet flat on the ground, plantigrade, which dogs don't. Dogs are digitigrade, so they stand up on their toes with their heel well off the ground. So it's got a lot of problems. Also, it has the right number of toes on the back foot, and technically on the front feet as well. So it has 4 on the back and 5 on the front. But the dew claw, this inner toe, is way higher. It's not down on the ground nearly the same length as the other toes. Looks nothing like that. So this is a pretty bad skeleton. But again, it is probably the best mammal, at least mammal skeleton, of the year. So it gets worse from here. But let's take a look at this bat first. I really don't have many complaints about this bat. The wings are really quite accurate. I mean, they've got essentially the right number of fingers going down through the patagium. They look great, and they're in basically the right spots. It's got the right joints in its arm. It's got the thumb protruding from outside. It's connecting to basically the right parts of the body, which also looks quite good. Body, I've got no complaints with this body. Head looks really reasonable. These are the nice big ears of an echolocating bat, and given the kind of leaf-like structure of the nose, this is probably a nasal screamer. The strangest thing about this whole bat would probably just be the suction cups on the wings. But if you've seen our documentary on all of the bats, then you probably already know that 2 bat families actually have suction cups. The disc-wing bats and the sucker-footed bats. And these are the only bats that roost head up. Now, only one of those has suction cups on its wings, the disc-wing bats, but that means that these suction cups aren't that crazy. And the sucker-footed bat has suckers pretty close in location to these, actually, as are some of the suckers on the disc-wing bats, which also have tails that are largely contained within the uropatagium, though neither of these bats are nose screamers. Both are mouth shouters. But I don't think the suction cups were put here for anatomical accuracy. That said, this is far from an offensive bat decoration, and it could spend the Halloween season here in Clint's Reptile Room. What could not is this horrible elephant. Now, in fairness, elephant skeletons don't look much like what you would think it would look like if you'd only seen an elephant from the outside. I mean, their skulls understandably played a large role in convincing people that giant cyclopses existed. And they walk on their toes like ballerinas and dogs. And I don't think most people saw that coming. But wouldn't those have been wonderful things to show off? So this is a giant missed opportunity. But let's hit on some of its worst features. Now, elephants probably have the most proportionately robust limb bones of any extant animal, but not like these. These limbs are, they're just, the skeletal structure is as thick as an elephant's entire legs. So there would be no space for there to be any musculature or skin or anything else like that. And honestly, you see pretty clear bones on the front legs until you get to the feet, which look basically like fully fleshed elephant feet with only 3 toes though. And then these back legs, you kind of can see the bones. They're just thick as can be. And again, this is a plantigrade skeleton, whole foot on the ground. Elephants walk up on their toes. So the limbs are just all kinds of bad. Probably not the worst thing about it, but all kinds of bad. Bone ears, terrible, but every mammal skeleton we have this year has them. This one has a bone trunk, not even just like a trunk that's present on the skeleton, but like a legitimate vertebral column of a trunk. And then this isn't nearly as bad, but the tusks come out of kind of like the middle of its face, whereas tusks are teeth, so they need to come out right from the mouth, basically, and these are well above the mouth. I don't think this person knows that tusks are teeth. And then, of course, in real elephants, they've got a really large temporal fenestra, which is the single hole on mammals and other synapsids. And it's it's kind of so large that it grows into the back of the eye socket. And so the eye sockets aren't little circles like this. They're kind of like crescent shaped. It's easy not to even recognize them as eye sockets, which is why it's also easy to, see an elephant skull and think that the eye socket is the giant hole in the middle of the face. There's a lot wrong, and really nothing that's really all that right about this skeleton. It's just a total disaster. I mean, whenever you can learn more from a bad skeleton of a unicorn, you know you've missed the mark pretty badly. But I do really like a lot about this unicorn skeleton. Though I don't care for the bone ears, the bone mane, or the bone tail. Horses, and I assume unicorns, do have bone in their tails, but not all of the hairs are made out of bone. So it's not great. The lack of any sort of diastema between these teeth is one glaring and unnecessary miss. But I am thrilled to death with these legs. They still aren't perfect, but they are so much better than most horse legs. Most people don't even know where their elbows and knees are, let alone what the rest of their pectoral and pelvic girdles look like. But look at these. You've got the scapula running right here, and then you've got the humerus and the elbow right up kind of at the bottom of the rib cage almost, and then the foreleg. And you'll see the elbow bends just like our elbow. Same thing goes back here. You got the pelvis, you got the femur, and then you've got the knee also up high and close to the body. People just don't realize that that's what's going on. What they think is the elbow on horses that bends backwards is actually their wrist, and what they think is the knee that bends backwards on horses is actually their ankle. And so they're getting that all kinds of wrong. And then below those joints, you've got the metacarpals up front, which are often called cannon bones, and the metatarsals in the back, also called cannon bones. And then they stand on the tip of one toe on each foot, though ancient horses had 3 toes. These more modern horses stand on a single toe, and when they stand on the tip of the toe, that's called unguligrade, which is actually a term I think I really first learned from you guys doing these videos. I learned all about plantigrade and digitigrade in school, and I think honestly when I was taught about digitigrade, things like horses and other ungulates were often used as the examples. The reality is that ungulates stand unguligrade on the very tips of the toes, whereas things like dogs and cheetahs and stuff walk on the toes but not on the tips of the toes. That's digitigrade. But that gets us to the halfway point of this year's decorations. And I want to take a moment to thank our supporters on Patreon who provided most of these skeletons and who allow us to make content like this. If you would like to join them or our YouTube members in supporting content like this and the other content that we put out each week, or would just like to see the rad features that we have for them, please consider checking it out. Okay, so I have 2 more new mammals and, of course, our reunion with our kitty. But first, this bear. It's dreadfully terrible. At least if it's supposed to be a bear. But I think, if you look at it more carefully, it's actually supposed to be a teddy bear. Who knows what their skeletons are supposed to look like? Well, I'll tell you. Of course, they have bone ears. And their nasal opening is heart-shaped. They are plantigrade, like real bears, but only have 3 toes on each foot, not the 5 of real bears. They have only 1 total arm bone and 2 total bones in their legs, and ribs all the way down to where their pelvis would be if they had one, each connected to a gigantic sternum, and a coccyx, but no external or outward-facing tail. And if you think that's wrong, prove it to me in some other way. Also, they have no teeth. Teddy bears don't bite, which is more than can be said for my zombie cat, which also has 3-toed plantigrade feet. Very different from the 5 front toes and 4 hind toes that actual cats usually have on their digitigrade feet. But the real question is, how does this cat's face compare to my favorite cat's face? Well, let's go track down my CATAT and we'll do a double face reveal. Let's go find it. Okay. I found my kitty. But actually, Will and Jason found my kitty, and I have not seen my kitty yet. But he's burned on my memory. So let's start with the new kitty, just because he's so the worst. Or is he? All right. New kitty! Oh, it's hideous. It's got, well, obviously the 3 toes that are, well, with claws out, but the toes not spread. So I think only cheetahs have claws that work like this. Other cats, the claws are retracted in unless the toes are spread out, and then they extend. So, and then of course 3 is not enough. Really, just for like a hideous, mangy zombie cat with relatively plantigrade front feet, but digitigrade back feet. It's awful and hideous, but it's worse than I remember now. Okay. How are you ever gonna top that? Fetch me my cobra. Oh, they're a handsome pair. They are a handsome. I forget just how insane this cat. I forgot the rodent teeth for a minute, and I certainly forgot that it has circle pupils and elliptical pupils at the same time. Oh, it's how many toes? 4 front and 4 back. So, you know, in some ways it's doing a little bit better than the other cat. Oh, what a pair they are. But yeah, no, you're out of your league, friend. You had no idea what you were up against. You and I had forgotten. What a world. All right, let's talk about the fish. Okay, so that leaves us with the rayfin fish, the spiders, and the birds. This fish is so terrible. I have no idea what kind of fish this is supposed to be. The teeth and the basic shape kind of suggest piranha, but it is so much worse than our last piranha. The head is not the right shape, nor is the operculum. The head should kind of continue up this way a little bit. And I don't know what's with this wiggly operculum that it's got, but it's crazy. And the fins are astoundingly wrong or just missing completely. Fins I have never seen missing on any fish figurine. Well, they're missing. It has a caudal fin, and that's good. I've never seen a fish model not have one. I mean, even like the little fish that people put on their cars, they have no other fins, but they still have a caudal fin. Everything's got a caudal fin. If you're only going to put one fin on a fish, it's probably this one. It has a dorsal fin, a huge dorsal fin, which is nothing like the shape or placement of the dorsal fin of a piranha. The piranha dorsal fin is not as long, and it's located much farther back. And they have 2 of them. This is just 1. But that's really the end of where it's any good at all. After that, it has 2 really weird looking, probably pelvic fins, given that they're paired and where they're located, though the actual pelvic fins on piranhas are much farther back. But the pectoral fins come out from up around here, much higher. And there are just none. I've never seen a fish skeleton not have pectoral fins. I mean, like even eels have pectoral fins. Most of them anyway. Maybe not your true eels. I'm trying to think about that. But I've never seen somebody not put pectoral fins on a fish anything. And then the anal fin is quite large on a piranha, and this one has no anal fin at all, despite having the supports for a big anal fin. Because this probably wouldn't be here if it didn't have one. I don't know what's with this burly sternum either. Crazy. The rest of the skeleton is not that crazy. I mean, the vertebrae should be more in the center, and it probably should be connected to the head. But this part up here that supports the fin ray, that's all there. So the rest is not crazy, but I mean, how does it not have pectoral fins? I don't know. But that gets us to the surprisingly good and the worst. And I think I'll start with the good, which lets us end with terrible, terrible disappointment. So this duck it's typically terrible. It has bone webbing, bone wing feathers, and 3 bone tails instead of a single small pygostyle and fused hand bones that are typical of real birds. It also has no sternum, whereas real flighted birds have a huge keeled sternum where the flight muscles used to both raise and lower the wings attach. It is terrible, but in all the ways that these bird skeletons are always terrible. But then this happened. And don't get me wrong, this skeleton has some real problems. It has a mess of bone tail feathers and a bone wattle and comb. It shares some of the good basic leg morphology with the duck. It has a femur bone, a tibiotarsus, and then a tarsometatarsus, which are actually extended foot bones, because this, once again, is the ankle. These are digitigrade. And this is the knee up much higher. All accurate. It is properly digitigrade. And it has ansiodactyl feet, which is proper for a chicken, which means three toes out the front, 1 coming out the back. So that's not bad, but not much better than the duck other than the lack of bone webbing. The keel, which it has, is still too far forward and too small for a chicken, but at least it has a sternum with a small keel. And more revolutionary still, I think this is the first bird we have ever had without bone wing feathers. It has a humerus, a radius, an ulna, a metacarpus, and phalanges. This is what a bird wing looks like. It should have a kind of a bigger thumb up here called an alula, but that's a bird wing on a bird. It may not be perfect, but this is the best bird skeleton I have ever seen. Or at least it was. Because then we found this. And I know that no flamingos have 4 large toes like this, but at least there's no bone webbing. But look at the knees. Nobody knows where the knees of flamingos are, but whoever made this knew. And yeah, that's not what a flamingo pelvis looks like, but it's in the right spot. This rib cage, sternum, and yes, keel were made by someone who did at least some kind of an image search for flamingo skeleton pictures. Hope they don't lose their job for that. But we're just getting started. The neck and skull are pretty much spot on also. Even the unexpected way that their beak opens for their upside down filter feeding lifestyle. But there's more. Because look at these wings. And I will mention that the metacarpus doesn't have the hole in it, but one side of the hole is made up of a very tiny bone in flamingos. And this looks just about right. It even has an alula. Not just no bone feathers, an actual alula. The best wing ever found on a Halloween bird skeleton. It's a miracle, but it's not over. Because it has a pygostyle. This is not an anatomical model. It isn't supposed to be. But it is correct enough to not embarrass any zoologist. Honestly, it's astounding. It exists. Because, as it turns out, it's pretty easy to do a Google image search these days. And it's a popular Halloween decoration. So it isn't that they have to be terrible to sell. But then again, some of them are quite terrible. Spiders. Spiders, spiders, spiders. I love spiders. And the reality is, this one is great. Though it is lacking like 6 of the 8 eyes that it should have. And the 2 that it has are in kind of the wrong place. They should be in a cluster more about right here. At least on a tarantula. But there is so much to like about this spider. I'll start with the fact that it has the right body segments. It has 2 of them. Both of them very large. This first one, often called a cephalothorax, though there's no evidence that at any point in the history of spiders did they have a separate head and thorax. So a cephalothorax would be a fusion of the 2. It's not that, so a better term for it is probably calling it the prosoma. And it also has what would be called an opistosoma, or an abdomen, here in the back. It has all of the right legs, and in all of the right places. Has 8 of them total. It also has 2 pedipalps, which are very large and exaggerated in tarantulas, as well as a lot of other spiders. And it has 2 chelicerae, which are the claw-like mouth parts of chelicerates, which includes spiders and other arachnids. The one thing in spiders is that the chelicerae have been modified into fangs, so they're not functioning as a claw anymore. It has spinnerets here at the back of the abdomen. Fantastic and easy to overlook. This is the most amazing thing to me. It has a foveal groove right here, which is the outside indicator of an attachment point that muscles from all over attach to, including the muscles for their suction-powered stomach. And so you see this little dent up here. It even has that, which is just amazing. And this is actually what a spider skeleton looks like, since they have an exoskeleton. This spider is worse. Though it got much of that right also. It has the right number of legs, it has the right number of body segments. It has, unfortunately, no pedipalps, so that's wrong. It has no chelicerae and no spinnerets. And it still only has 2 little eyeballs. But it's not too terrible to see the light of day. But then, there was this. The worst spider Halloween decoration I have ever seen. I hate it so much. I will say that I always ask my classes to draw spiders from memory. And they almost always do what this artist did. Put the legs on the abdomen. This is apparently where most people think that their legs go. But they don't. They go up front on the prosoma. And while some of the past spider decorations we've had have kind of had their legs coming from between the prosoma and the opistosoma, they are usually at least located far forward on the opistosoma. Not here though. They were dedicated to a lack of ambiguity. These legs, every one of them, is inescapably attached to the abdomen. Add that to the fact that this is clearly a spider made of vertebrate bones, and this is the most ignorant necromancer in the history of this channel. This might be the worst Halloween skeleton yet. But what do you think? And should we do this for a 6th time next year? As always, like and subscribe, and we'll see you real soon. Happy Halloween. Just try pointing it up because I can't see everything right now. And oh yeah, that took care of the glare and gave me more view.
So you see half of Zoologist?
Yep.
Okay.
I see 60% of Zoologist.
Fancy.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the fish. Oh no.
They both look like cat aliens.
So I was looking at the tag on this, and it said fish, and then I I was like, are they trying to say poison? But this is French, is it not?
Oui, oui. Poisson.
This is poisson. Le poisson, le poisson. How I love le poisson. Love to chuck and serve little fish. Yeah, this is not Chewbacca because it uses fangs. It's
Oh, good.
envenomation baka.
Envenomation. I mean,
Of course, it doesn't have any fangs either. Can't Chewbacca.
Can't Chewbacca.
Is
If this was just like a hike, like charging them anything really doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
that the minimum viable product though?
minimum viable product?
Look at Clint. This is
Are you
so
product manager?
cute.
I've been listening to you guys for the last 15 years.
Wow.
I've created a business with you. I've created a whole other business. I've come a long way. Look what you've done to me.
Student has become the best.
Yeah, you've caused me to completely divert away from my original career path. Come on now.